Hello, you malty mismatch of mellow malt maniacs. I'm Ralphie and welcome to the Bothy, somewhere in the middle of the fabled and legendary Irish Sea, caught up in the tapestry of time and drenched with the mists of Manannan's cloak. Yes, it's all very folklory round here. And you've got goblins, you've got pixies, you've got giants, you've got orky type things, you've got water horses, you've got selkies and banshees, and of course you've got me. I'm Ralphie. Welcome to my channel called Ralphie.com, home of quality spirit reviews, in which I tend to kind of deep dive a little bit further to provide a little bit more in-depth information about quality whiskies in particular, but not just whiskies, but usually whiskies, that are getting increasingly expensive, and therefore when we're buying them we've got to be careful what we're buying. So I review them for you to give you a point of reference. But before I go any further, a big thank you to Christian Atala for that malt mention, because every one of these reviews starts with a malt mention. And also a number of a review, which is 985. Yes, we've only got 15 weeks. It's not long until Ralphie Review 1000, in which I will, over the last 14 years, have opened 1,000 bottles of quality liquor, usually whiskey, which 99.9% of which I've bought myself with my money, provided thanks to you clicking on my ads and being a Patreon subscriber. And this is what lets me have my independence, and also allows me the sheer variety of what I review, so as that I can kind of point you to whiskies and other quality spirits that you might not actually be aware of until recently. So that's one of my jobs, is to kind of help point you in the right direction and give you an idea of what to find if you start to branch out and explore whiskies from outside of Scotland, which is what this series now over the next 6 weeks is all about. It's my summer season and I'm doing my first world tour of whiskies, starting here at Ralphie Review 985 and including in Ralphie Review 991. Yep. And I'm going to start close to home. The country adjacent to Scotland in terms of landmass is England. It's just to the south. And in England, you have a significant diversity of customs, traditions and cultures, which has been homogenised into Britishness. So, for example, if someone's living in Cornwall, they will identify as Cornish. And likewise, if someone is living in Yorkshire, they will identify as Yorkshire. And they have a strong identity. And this, I think, is a very good way of regionalising English whisky. We're now at the stage where England needs to have its whisky regions. And I think its regions are going to be in the assembly of English counties. So you're going to have the counties in the north of England, the counties in the centre of England, and the counties in the south of England. And this is the way that England will organise its own indigenous whisky industry, which in fact is one of the most interesting and variable in terms of flavour profiles that you find at the moment. But of course everybody's talking about Japan and how unique and special and expensive Japanese whisky is. But it would not surprise me if Japanese distillers are having an eye on England, looking to buy an English distillery with which to make Japanese whisky. That would not surprise me, because stranger things have happened, malt makers. So this particular single malt, English single malt, and it's not the first one I've reviewed, but It's one of really the most recent generation, along with Cotswolds. So if you're not quite sure where to start with Cotswolds Distillery and their standard Founders Reserve bottling. That's a very good place to start with English whisky. This is Filey Bay, and Filey Bay is in Yorkshire on the east coast, just literally a half a mile away from the North Sea. And it has this east coast character that I would define, having spent a bit of time with this, I would describe it as a lowland Highland Scotch style of whisky, which is reminiscent of Speyside. Well, we've got to start somewhere. This is unpeated, the version I'm reviewing for you. This is it's a special release, Double Oak number 2. And I bought this because I felt it's a good representative of the actual indigenous spirit character that's coming out of this distillery. So we're going to start by giving it a wee nose and a taste, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this small English distillery, which is part of a zeitgeist in English whisky making which is appearing, some of which is good, some of which is terrible, but most of which is interesting. I'm getting brulee and ginger, which is strongly reminiscent to me of virgin oak. And this is backed up by the fact that it actually states in the packaging, very helpfully, so I must commend Filey Bay for this, that apart from being natural colour and non-chill filtered and bottled at 46%, and it's one of 2,000 bottles, so it's a restricted release, already we're getting clear, definitive messages that this is an integrity whisky, which all new distilleries need to be, or else they're going to be absolutely nowhere. They're going to be high and dry. But they also provide information about the casks that they're using. So this double, what they describe as the double oak, is in fact a combination of maturation matured in selected ex-bourbon casks and also virgin oak casks, which are most certainly virgin American oak casks, because you're getting those strong sort of brulee baked custard notes. Fortunately, the actual calibre of the spirit signature and the richness of the spirit is coming through strongly, that it means it carries the weight with it, and the spirit, even at a relatively young age, is not being overwhelmed and swamped by the virgin oak impact, which would be, even another year, it would be getting too close to the edge. What age do I put this? I put this at 5 to 6 years old. The distillery was opened in May 2016 and first bottled 3 years later in 2019. They have been putting out a number of permutations of their whisky, some of which are good and are being recognised, and others are not so good. And people are a bit disappointed in them, especially in relation to the price. I'll come back to that shortly. Taste. Neat. Young. Raw. Spirit driven. But with an interesting substance of character. This is going to be a wonderfully syrup, light and fruity malt in the next 2 or 3 years. It will excel as a 12-year-old, not a 10-year-old. It will be absolutely excellent as a 17-year-old, but that is quite a while away yet. At the moment, for the price, it's relatively expensive, and therefore, if you're going to be curious about Filey Bay, shop around to see who is charging the most reasonable prices for it. The arrival is swift, development is swift, finish is swift. This really, really needs water, and I do mean significant amount of water. I'm adding, 2 full teaspoons, 10 millilitres of water to this whisky. And the reason I'm doing that is because there's a real rich substance of character and fullness of flavour coming from the stills that they're using. They're really quite large stills. In fact, as far as I'm aware, they're the largest stills, pot stills, that are being used for producing whisky in England at the moment. But there's more, because at this distillery they are also using a copper column still. Now, not the big massive industrial still that you would associate with Scottish grain whiskies like North British and Cameron Brigg. These are little boutique craft column stills, and being English whisky, it can be a single malt without being produced exclusively in pot stills. I was about to say column stills, but there again, in Scotland you have single malts which are not produced exclusively in traditional pot stills, but you have Lomond stills still in use in some distilleries, and they too are made of copper, and they basically work like a cubist pot still. My opinion is no harm in a column still so long as the column isn't too tall and there's not too much refining going on. That's where the danger lies. That's where you're turning whiskey into vodka, when you have too much refraction going on in column stills. So, to the best of my knowledge, they are combining pot still and short or craft column still whisky together to help accent the light and fruity nature of their whisky, which I think is a bit of a risk, because in the future, well, although people will still want light and fruity whisky, people also want big, greasy, dirty, elemental, sensation-rich whiskies, such as you get from the likes of Edra Dŵr and Onayla from Kilchoman. The two good examples. So I hope they're not putting all the bread in the one basket here at the distillery. I doubt it though, because the distillery was set up by the late Dr. Jim Swan, who was a master at what he did, and they were very fortunate to get him just in time before, unfortunately, one of Scotch whisky's great ambassadors, who rarely gets mentioned but should be mentioned, Dr. Swan, who passed away. And this is part of his legacy, and a very fitting tribute, I might add. Something else I'd like to mention is that this particular distillery is sourcing all its barley locally. So you have Northern Altitude, British Isles barley, East Coast, which is a great environment for growing barley, to be honest. And also they're bottling their own whisky. And this all adds up. I think the next step is that they install a cooling worm tub rather than relying on cooling sleeves. That would be another major step forward, and perhaps additionally a third still, pot still, which is direct fired through an oil bath. This is the way distilleries grow. They diversify and build on the theme of what they've got. So I've added a significant amount of water here, and there's a reason for that, because over the last few weeks I've been really experimenting with different amounts of water in it, and the more water you put in, the more rapidly it settles down, opens up, and starts to deliver the quality of the raw spirit itself, which is really very good. In this permutation it works. In some other cask finishes, not so much. So if you're looking to buy Filey Bay, look out for the flagship bottling, the Moscatel bottling, probably the IPA as well is an interesting one. And the one to avoid is the STA. Right. So the STR. The STR is basically rejuvenated cask. They've got some of these rejuvenated casks in, and now they're realising probably that doesn't actually work for them. I don't think rejuvenated casks works for many distilleries, to be honest. And STR means shaved, toasted, recharred. That's what STR means. So if you ever see that associated with a bottle of whiskey, you now know what it means. It means red light is flashing, beware, be cautious. It's just my ongoing experience with rejuvenated casks. It's harder to do properly than people might realise. Cheers. Nose. The nose is more perfumed. It's more Lily of the Valley, and it's a little bit more menthol and mint. It reminds me strongly of Redbreast, young Redbreast, the 7-year-old pot still from Ireland. It's that kind of nose. Again, the palate, young, but richer and fuller flavoured. We're getting a little bit of a sour note coming off the cask, which will, if you give it time, settle down and dissipate slightly. And frankly, to justify the price you're paying for this whisky, which is roughly about £60 at the shops, it needs to be. However, in fairness to Filey Bay, it's English whisky. English whisky is still finding its feet. I bought a bottle because I'm really curious to taste some English whiskies, because with my experience I can see how they're going to develop in the future, if they can get hold of the quality of casks that they need to progress. Big if. So I wish the distilleries luck with that. Final taste before the malt mark. The palate really develops, and despite being a young whisky, it's got a lot to say for itself. Young whiskies are worth drinking only if they've been well made from the still. This is critical. You have some distilleries that make a rough spirit. They force the spirit through the still, and then they allow the cask over years to kind of just calm the spirit down. But unfortunately, when you rush spirit, particularly when it doesn't go into great casks, you end up with something that's anemic and just angry and upset and never sorts itself out. However, if you have a well-made spirit that's been properly produced, even at a young age, even when it's in having its tiny temper tantrums as a young whisky, it's still, given time, settling down, it's still got a good conversation for the person, with the person that's drinking it. So there you go. That's my assessment, commendation. Very refreshing to see simple, practical information in the back of the label. Not a lot of flannel. Basically, not too much theatre going on in the bottle and the container. This is quite refreshing as well. It comes across as having integrity, and it really helps to focus the mind and the experience really into what's actually inside the bottle, which is what is the only reason we buy the bottle ultimately, and the only reason we would go buy another bottle. So what mark am I going to give this? Let's just give a final taster. More pronounced, lily, floral, fragrant, pure traditional pot still Irish whisky style. The virgin oak gives that kind of real gingery brulee in the development. Grapefruit oil, a little bit of cola cubes in the background, soft spice, but very mild soft spice, bit of powdered ginger, and a little bit of cardamom. And in the finish, it's pretty soft actually. It's still young, so be aware of that. And this will be reflected in my marks. There we go. 80 out of 100. It's a malt mark for an English single malt whisky. There you have it. I hope you find this interesting, because when you go online and look for availability of English whisky, you'll find it really restricted to the UK market. And even within the UK market, there's still few enough English distilleries that you can basically count them in two hands. So it's very easy to navigate the whisky scene, but the plans in the foreseeable future are for about 50 more distilleries, mainly in and around the south of England and London. So be aware of that. It's going to get crowded. So the ones that last, the ones that survive, are the ones that make the good quality spirit. And I think that Filey Bay is off to a good start. Just needs, as I mentioned, a bit more time. I'm Ralphie, thank you for watching. If you pop back for Ralphie Review 985 Extras, I shall be introducing a few of the whiskies that I'm going to be reviewing for you. And I'm just going to kind of walk through my initial impressions so as that you can see what I'm looking at in terms of world whisky, what's there and what isn't there. I'm going to explain that as well. So it kind of sets the theme for the next few reviews. And there you have it, malt mates. Thanks for watching.